All right, we're going to talk about the arguments against the 70th week of Daniel not being fulfilled and still being waited on in the future before the return of Christ. Argument number one, premise one, the event which fulfills Daniel 9:24 must fall inside of the 70-week time period. Premise two, the death of Jesus is the event which fulfills the prophecy. Conclusion, Jesus' death must occur during the allotted time period of the 70 weeks of years prophesied in order for it to be fulfilled. So this is a comparison timeline of the correct view historicism and the false view futurism. So let's take a look at the text. "70 weeks are determined upon thy people and thy holy city to finish the transgression, make an end of sin, to make reconciliation, otherwise known as atonement, for iniquity, and to bring an everlasting righteous and seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy." 70 weeks are determined. That's 490 years, according to the prophecy. See my other videos if you don't understand that. This is universally understood as the atonement that Christ makes for the sins of those who believe. So what is the problem? I'll be covering in more detail later the timeline in more particularly, but there's agreement on what it's saying generally. It's weeks of years. So futurism it's mentioned as 7 and 62, which is the first 69, and then there's the 70th week mentioned after that in the 27th verse, the final verse of the prophecy. So you have a decree, and then the time period until Messiah the Prince. But after 7 and 62 weeks shall Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks until Messiah the Prince. That's the first 7 and then 62. So then it says, and after the 62, which is 62, after the 62, everybody agrees on that. As you can see the cross here, he'll be cut off. But the futurist says the 70th week, we're still waiting for it to start. And as you can see here, after in verse 26, 62, which is after the 7, in verse 25, 7 and 62, after the 62 shall Messiah be cut off. Everyone universally pretty agrees that this is the death of Jesus. As you can see, if he dies after the 62 and the 70th hasn't started yet, because that's the first 69, the cross is not on the timeline of the allotted 70 weeks. The correct view is that there's a decree in a very particular year, which lines up with the historical facts, which is the third decree of Artaxerxes in 457 BC, one of the most widely attested dates in history. And then you count appropriate time, 7 weeks of years is 49 years, which would be the beginning of the 62. And we see right at the end of the 62 would be 27 AD in the 15th year of Tiberius's reign, beginning the 70th week right after the 69th week. 3.5 years after that into Jesus' ministry, we have Jesus dying on the cross, 31 AD. In the middle of the week, the 70th week, therefore fulfilling the prophecy, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's Jesus. This view fails miserably because it puts the death of Jesus, which is the appropriate event that brings an end to sin, makes atonement for sin, in the allotted time period, 70 weeks, correct? to do this. Unwittingly, the futurist places the death of Christ outside of the allotted time, making him fail the prophecy as determined by the word of God. 70 weeks are determined to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, etc. 70 weeks or 490 years of time to fulfill the prophecy. Jesus' death is what fulfills the prophecy. It must occur within the allotted time period. By placing a gap in between these weeks and placing the death of Christ in that gap means you're placing the death of Christ outside of the 70 weeks, which means the prophecy has failed. But don't despair. An exact match to the actual biblical data, exact match, appropriately, historically, and one of the most well-attested decrees in history, places Jesus' ministry beginning right at the end of the 69th week and his ministry beginning on the 70th. All you have to do is recognize the context of the 70-week prophecy and what it's about, and that is Jesus, the greatest prophecy in the Bible. This has Jesus fulfilling the prophecy right on time perfectly and confirming the new covenant and making atonement as according to the word of God. So, is this negotiable? Not really. Those who would place the death of Christ outside of the allotted time have set out to make the word of God fail according to as it is written.